but I think that's everyone in now, so we can get started.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone, for joining the RDP Swarthmore debate. We're really happy to host this event together. There was an event in the past that we worked on together, and we're really excited with this new group at Swarthmore, and to also be hosting this George Floyd protest debate as part of our series with RDP that's been ongoing. And we're going to speak a little bit more, someone else from the Rikers Debate Project. We'll give a little bit more on the background of Rikers Debate, as well as the Peasley Debate Society at Swarthmore. But I just want to introduce myself. Julia Bowling. I've been a volunteer with Rikers Debate Project for several years now, working, volunteering at several prisons, jails, excuse me, on Rikers Island, as well as the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. And for a while chaired the debate class at AMKC, which is the largest jail facility on Rikers. And recently I've been helping out with our Zoom debates as we transition to a virtual space. And so I'll just start off by introducing two of the esteemed judges that we have here today, and then I'll turn it over to Jay Leeds, who's going to introduce the other judges, and then we'll also have the debaters briefly introduce themselves. So Julie Baker is one of our judges today. She could wave her hand if she's there. A former vice president, 2006, and president 2007 of the Peasley Debate Society, top 10 speaker in the American Parliamentary Debate Association in 2007 and 2009, and the second place overall speaker at APDA National Championships in 2009. She lives in Chicago and works at a management consultant in higher education with the Huron Consulting Group. So thank you, Julie, for being with us. Joel Lawson is currently a private investor, could wave his hand if he's there, who is active in the nonprofit sector, including as a board member and finance chair of both Mission First Housing Group and affordable housing for communities with special needs, and Achievability, assisting single parent families to break this generational cycle of poverty. Joel is a graduate of Yale and the Wharton School and served as an officer in the US Navy. So thank you, Joel, for being with us here today as well. And I'll turn it over to Jay Leeds, who will provide the bios for additional judges.
Yes, I'll just briefly introduce our remaining judges. We have 4 Swarthmore faculty on the panel, and they are Nina Johnson, Associate Professor of Sociology, Anthropology, and Black Studies; Farha Ghanem, Professor and Chair of Sociology and Anthropology; Krista Thomason, Associate Professor of Philosophy; and Shawnee Evans, Visiting Assistant Professor of Sociology and Anthropology. Thanks very much to all of them for being here.
Great, thank you. So we'll turn it over now to the debaters. For Team A, we have Charles Hopkins of Rikers Debate Project, and Gillian, please correct me, Zaprisky of Peasley Debate Society.
Yes, my name is Charles Hopkins, and I'm a member of Rikers Debate Project. I was recently released from prison December the 5th, 2019. After serving 47 years in prison day for day and some change. While I was incarcerated, Rikers Debate had brought the project into the institution. While in the institution, I became a part of the project. I became a facilitator, and ultimately, when I got out, I contacted one of the people I'm in the Washington D.C. area. I contacted one of the instructors, and she navigated me through the process. I became a part of the fellowship, which is a project that Rikers Debate has for returning citizens, those of us that are prone to want to participate in this process. They allow us to become a part of the fellowship by putting us in a position where we can develop our debate skills. We can also create this type of activity. They have a number of things that we can do in the fellowship, and then encourage you. But more importantly, what they do, they encourage you to go forward with your ideas around social development and social growth. So I'm honored to be in this position, And it's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you.
Thanks, Charles. And Gillian, or Jillian, if you want to just correct me on your name spelling and wave your hand.
I'm Jillian. I'm a rising senior at Swarthmore.
Thank you. And then Team B, we have Michael Holder for RDP. If you want to introduce yourself briefly, and then Parker Snipes from Peasley Debate Society.
Yes, hello. My name is Michael Holder. I participate in, the RDV, and I was introduced by a good friend of mine, Matthew Moore. We was a part of the Beyond the Bars Fellowship with Columbia University, and since I've been with the Rikers debate team, I've learned a lot. I've experienced a lot, and I plan to be here for a long time. It's a great experience. I love it. Thank you. Thanks for having
Thanks.
me.
Parker, do you want to just wave your hand, say something quick?
Yeah, hi. I'm Parker. I am a rising senior for Peasley, majoring in economics and computer science. And debate is something I've really enjoyed in college. And so I'm happy to be here and help share that with everyone.
Awesome, thank you. So in terms of the run of show, we'll be doing a coin flip shortly that will determine whether Team A or Team B is taking on the government or the opposition. So if the coin flips heads, then Team A will get to decide. If it's tails, then Team B will get to decide. So just some context there, so that each team has prepared both sides, just to make it a little more challenging, and add a little extra work for our debaters today. So we appreciate all the work that they've put into it. So I'm actually going to hand it over now to Sagar Rao to talk a little bit about the background on Peasley.
Thank you. So Amos J. Peasley Debate Society is Swarthmore's competitive debate team, named after Amos J. Peasley, who was an alum from Swarthmore who debated on our team in the class of 1907. We're a member of the American Parliamentary Debate Association, which is just a circuit of colleges and universities mainly on the East Coast, as well as the International British Parliamentary Circuit. So we travel to colleges and universities across the world every year. Swarthmore has won numerous awards on both the national and international level. As I'm sure you heard about when Julia talked about Julie Baker's awards. Each year we attend weekly APTA or British parliamentary tournaments, along with APTA Nationals and other British parliamentary tournaments in England for Oxford and Cambridge, or around the world for the Worldwide Championships. Last year we did a event with Rikers Debate Project that was in person, in which we did a demo debate much like this one. Unfortunately, we're not able to meet all together in person now, but it's great that we're able to do this over Zoom. So I will turn it over to whoever is introducing the Rikers Debate Project so that they can talk about this.
Caitlin Halpern, thank you.
Thank you so much to everyone for being here tonight, and in particular to Josh Morrison, the founder and original executive director of the Rikers Debate Project, to Julia Bowling for making this event possible, and to all of the Swarthmore team for being a part of this, both in person and rolling with it virtually. My name is Caitlin Halpern, and I'm the acting executive director of the Rikers Debate Project, as well as the head of the Houston chapter. I also was an APTA debater at Columbia longer ago than I would like to admit. The Rikers Debate Project was founded in 2016 with a mission of teaching public speaking and critical thinking to currently and formerly incarcerated people, to give everyone a say in the decisions that affect their lives, and to empower people to advocate for themselves and their communities. We started in just one jail on Rikers Island and quickly grew to several weekly classes in New York City, as well as other jails and prisons in New Jersey, Connecticut, DC, New Orleans, and Houston. As you can tell, COVID-19 has transformed our program much as it's transformed all of our lives. Our in-person classes and events have been suspended since mid-March, and we've had to transition to an entirely remote program. For formerly incarcerated people, as Julia mentioned, we've been running a debate program via Zoom. This is the third installment of our George Floyd debate series about defunding the police, and we also have an ongoing series of virtual events about COVID-19 vaccine trials. For our currently incarcerated students, we have a correspondence course entirely through the mail. And the correspondence course allows us to continue providing educational services to our students, as well as a conduit of information between folks on the inside and folks on the outside. It allows us to provide reliable updates about COVID every week and to learn more about the conditions in carceral facilities. To date, our student reports have been featured in the Houston Chronicle, the Marshall Project, The Appeal, and ProPublica, among others. As much as the Rikers Debate Project has grown over the years, we remain an all-volunteer, grassroots-funded organization powered by people like you. So if you feel inspired to donate or volunteer after tonight's event, please visit us at rikersdebateproject.org. We're actually currently working to raise $15,000 to sustain our programming through the end of the year, so we would be very grateful for any contribution you can make of your money or your time. Tonight's debate topic is so important, both to all of us here and to the folks who can't be here tonight, our currently incarcerated students. To borrow a motto from Just Leadership USA, the people closest to the problem are closest to the solution. And few people are closer to the problems of abusive policing than our currently and formerly incarcerated students. Over the past couple of months, I've been very surprised to learn that this question is extremely divisive among our students, and I've been humbled and impressed by the creative and insightful solutions they've proposed. If you'll indulge another cliche, I have absolutely learned more from my students than they have from me. I know that you will enjoy hearing from our formerly incarcerated fellows, Charles and Michael, tonight, and I hope that you'll follow the Rikers Debate Project to keep hearing those voices in the future.
Awesome, thank you, Caitlin. And now I'm gonna turn it over to Gar, who's gonna do the coin flip.
So this is just so that you can all see how the coin flips. Oh wait, hold on, sorry. Someone needs to call first. I need to just call it before I flip it. Parker, would you like to call it?
Hey.
Heads? Okay, perfect. Might call it. It is tails. Okay, so that means that Charles Hopkins and Jillian Sapersky, Team A, will be able to choose the side that they prefer.
We go.
Gov. Okay, so the government side will be Team A, Charles and Jillian, and Team B, the opposition, will be Michael Holder and Parker Snipes. And if the Prime Minister, Charles Hopkins, is ready, I'll call him to order. First, I should give the resolution. This House would immediately reduce policing budget significantly by more than 50% and reinvest the funding in ways that reduce crime, violence, and injustice. And so, responding to that resolution, I will call the Prime Minister, Charles Hopkins, to give a 3-minute speech.
Thank you everyone for allowing us to come together this day to address this critical issue that is plaguing our country, the police. We recognize that collectively, the police citywide has over $100 billion collectively a year. We, the Parliament, resolved that this House will reduce the police budget significantly by more than 50% and funding in other ways to reduce crime, violence, and injustice. And to that point, we resolved, one, that the monies allocated to the law enforcement institutions are not being used to serve and protect the community, but to terrorize them, thus making them ineffective. Two, the law enforcement institutions only direct 5% of their resources towards fighting serious crimes, and the rest of the resources are being directed towards social activity. In support of our position, we recognize that under the current system of policing, the police are seen as an occupying force in our community. That the police has this persona of being a militarized occupying force. That the purpose of the police has always been to serve and protect. And the critical part of their policing is to establish a trust factor. As we see from the social discontent that's going on in society today, it's a result of the lack of trust on the part of the police. by the society. We believe that the police are ineffective in terms of doing what they're supposed to do. That we recognize since 2019 that over 15,000 people have been killed by gun violence. So the police are not doing nothing to curb the violence that's being perpetuated against the community. But however, whenever the police come into the community has a sense of fear that the police is coming there to in turn interrogate them, lock them up. It's not uncommon to see in the Black community and foreign oppressed community, people being victimized by the police. So we believe that the police are ineffective in terms of doing their job as they delegated to do. Second, we believe that the police only do 5% of their resources towards policing. The remainder part of their resources are geared towards doing social service work, rousing drug addicts, rousing homeless people, rousing street walkers, loiterers, majority 911 calls are called about social issues. So therefore, we believe that it's imperative that the monies that are being taken, the 50%, could be used towards better schools, better housing, better education, building a relationship between the community and the police to utilize some of this money towards that end. We believe, therefore, that the reduction of the 50% is warranted and necessary, and it will make the police a more effective entity as opposed to being an occupying military force as seen by the community. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much to the Prime Minister, Charles. I'll turn it over now to the Leader of Opposition, Michael Holder.
Yes, good evening. Police do essential work. They save countless lives and provide essential law enforcement. They are an essential law enforcement role within the community. There was a time in New York City where people couldn't walk down the street without, getting robbed or getting shot or getting brutalized by, criminals within the community. And just their presence from crime then in the 90s to now, crime has dropped dramatically, due to more police presence. And as we see, there are a lot of police on the street. So if that decreased the crime, why would we cut budgets? Why would we cut the budget? If we cut the budget, crime will go up. These officers, they put their life on the line on a daily basis. And with that responsibility comes a great deal of stress to serve and protect, and to also protect their own lives. And it's a shame that barbers and hairdressers get more hours of training than our officers who we look towards or who we look to save our lives and the lives of others. Any kind of meaningful reform, requires funding for hiring, retraining, and it's impossible if, that would be impossible, if there are significant budget cuts. So the funding will harm, reform efforts on that front. And we just need more programs to train for, their mental health, with them putting their lives on the line and dealing with those certain stresses. And, you know, I more budget cuts would mean, I'm trying to picture money taken out of a department we depend on. And every time I think of it, I think of Mexico, you know, with look at their police, you know, and their funding and the corruption, you know, what will follow after budget cuts? What will follow after less officers are hired and put in certain areas to help curb crime and stop crime from or stop people from thinking of committing criminal acts? And that is a scary sight, and that's why we oppose defunding the police.
Great, thank you. Thank you to the Leader of Opposition. I'll turn it over now to the Member of Government, Jillian Zapersky. You have
Hello.
4 minutes.
Okay. All right, thank you. So the problem that we're clearly here to discuss is the combination of the unjust violence from police departments across the country that disproportionately affects people of color, especially Black people, but also making sure that we take into account, as the Leader of Opposition aptly pointed out, the fact that crime also disproportionately affects minority communities and vulnerable communities as well. So we think that at this point in time, as my partner pointed out, our country is experiencing huge amounts of uprising, mistrust, and we're at a tipping point where the momentum that we have to address problems of racial justice and to address police accountability is like it's never been before. We think that this requires defunding the police and actually will help to reduce the crime that the Leader of Opposition talks about for a number of reasons. So firstly, is that we think that the police, in terms of its function, is overly inclusive in terms of the kinds of services it provides. It's ridiculous that the only government phone number service provider that children are taught to call call in the case of an emergency is someone who comes to the scene with a big gun. And Charles points this out when he talks about how only 5% of the cases are the money is spent to allocated towards fighting serious crime. Really, the vast majority of the things that the police deal with does not require the kind of militarized training that they say. We say that there's a time and place for that, and that's how we stop the kinds of crimes that the Leader of Opposition is talking about, but most of what the police does isn't doing that. Things like fighting mental health problems, helping homeless people, dealing with health emergencies with homeless people on the streets. We think that the funding that is not used towards fighting violent crime, but instead used for other kinds of things within the police force could be more aptly used to fund a wider variety of social services to deal with kinds of emergencies that we see. Most of the emergencies do not require a big man to come with a gun. And that's not what most people want to see when they're having interpersonal difficulties, mental health crises, etc. The opposition might tell us, well, why not just allocate that funding towards funding to the police to better deal with these kinds of situations? Well, we think that that's just not an efficient way to allocate resources, etc., because of the fact that there are inherently going to be some people who are specialized to do more things than others. Why make one force specialize in everything? But secondly, is that we think that the well-founded distrust between the community and the police means that only significant structural reform will actually restore that trust. And so as it is, this distrust makes it unlikely that the police is actually going to be effective in fighting the kinds of crime that the Leader of the Opposition talks about, because that crime is in part perpetuated by the fact that nobody believes the police is there to protect them. That causes cycles of crime, recidivism, etc., because people are part of communities where that are significantly depressed by lots of people going to prison, etc., which can only be solved by structural reforms of the kinds that we propose by reallocating the funding to do community enrichment, etc. We think that it's also the best way to decrease crime. Most people don't choose to commit crime when they have better options. So instead of just trying to punish people after the fact, after they've committed a crime, we think a better idea is to allocate some of that funding, still keep some police force, but some of that funding to prevention of crime by enriching communities and decreasing the chance that people will be in conditions, economic hardship, etc., that make them likely to commit crime in the first place. For these reasons, we're very, very proud to propose.
Okay, thank you very much. And moving on now to the member of opposition, Parker Snipes. You have 4 minutes.
So Jillian does a really good job here of highlighting the fundamental problems with policing, which I'm going to put into 2 buckets. One of them is the over-policing issue, the use of excessive force and brutality in situations where it's not needed. And the second is sort of the under-policing, which is essentially the failure to respond to fundamentally social problems that underlie a lot of the issues that police run into. What she doesn't give you is any mechanisms to actually resolve a lot of the tension in those cases. So what we're going to propose is that there's 2 ways to fundamentally change the nature of policing in this country. One is through new hiring, essentially hiring new officers in police departments that are able to do their jobs differently and not over-respond with the type of force that we've seen in these cases. The other is new training, essentially hiring officers who are trained differently, giving them different, essentially jobs similar to social workers and allowing them to respond in different ways. This is essentially what the town of Camden, New Jersey did. They downgraded a lot of their forces and they actually hired even more officers, trained them differently, and they were able to significantly reduce crime rates and also reports of police brutality. The only problem with her plan on this side is that it provides no mechanism for this change. There's no way to access the types of reforms that have been found in a lot of countries where they're changing their model internally, because there is no model for internal change. There's only a reduction of the number of officers on the streets, but not a change in their conduct. So given that, we're going to look at what she said line by line. So firstly, they say that it's an overly inclusive, they're trying to tackle an overly broad array of issues. We agree with this, but the fact that the police are getting involved 90% of the time, that's because 911 has been called. The police are always going to come on scene in that situation unless it's something like a fire. We don't want to have multiple agencies, say social workers coming in and also police coming in. That's not a tenable model. We need to have everything integrated into a single system so that the dispatcher can say, okay, this would be best for a police escort with a social worker. This one might be best for a social worker alone, rather than having to try and route calls to different federal departments. Then she says the training is bad and that police are mistrained. We completely agree on this point, but under Jillian's plan, there's probably going to be a hiring freeze. If you slash the budget by 50%, that almost automatically triggers hiring freezes for a federal agency, which means there's not going to be any new training, not going to be any new officers who are trained differently. On our side of the house, we actually have the money to put these new trainings in place. Then they say that essentially it's not efficient and you need to specialize. We agree. We think that there should be new hiring of officers who are specialized for different types of situations. Again, under Jillian's plan, this is actually not going to be possible. Then they say we need to reallocate funding. So this is an interesting argument because we agree there does need to be more investment in these communities on a whole lot of axes. There needs to be more investment in health and more investment in education. But the truth is, taking one, like say a few $1 million away from local police departments is a drop in the bucket. And as we've seen from increasing year-over-year budgets for teachers, for health, for education in a lot of jurisdictions, this actually hasn't made a big difference. What you need is a gigantic federal push in the trillions of dollars. And this is actually something that for example, Joe Biden is looking at implementing. We think that the marginal benefit that you would get from taking money away from police departments is not going to be all that big and would be massively outweighed by differential police response. So the weighing here is you prioritize changing the police's response to these situations, which we give you, over small improvements in sort of health and education, which is already being done at state and federal levels. It's much harder to do that by taking money away from the police. So then they say you're going to decrease the root causes of crime. But again, we think that in order that people have been trying to do this for decades and decades, you might make a little bit of benefit, but changing the policing is the immediate issue, and that's what we have to tackle with the most urgency. So basically, the most important issue is how can we actually create change within police departments? The only mechanism that they really give you is saying, okay, We're going to slightly reduce the inventory of problems that you tackle, but we think there's no effective mechanism to handle the problems which are causing people to be so desperate that they call 911. We allow for a much better response, which is already backed by the calls for significant reform in police departments. We think we give you the only meaningful route to change the police departments fundamentally in the better. This is why we proposed the resolution. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Before we move on to the closing speeches from both sides, first the opposition and then for the government, we will allow time for floor speeches. So if you are interested in presenting a floor speech, I believe up to 3 minutes, but please correct me if I'm wrong. Please put your name in the chat. And I think I'll turn it over now to Caitlin, who has a recorded floor speech that she will bring up while we wait for others to join in.
That's right. So I have a recorded floor speech from one of the founders of Rikers Debate, Jack Mucinak, who was incarcerated at the time he recorded this. So I think I need a host to enable me to screen share so I can sound share it.
I will do that right now.
Awesome, thank you.
You should be able to screen share now.
All right. Excellent.
I am a co-founder of the Rikers Debate Project, and I would like to begin this presentation first by saying thank you to all the volunteers and participants that were able to bring us together so that we all can have a healthy and important discussion. I'm sure most of us here have an intriguing and highly insightful opinions on the sensitive topic that we're about to debate. I hope we all enjoy what is being said and what will be said tonight. Our topic, the defunding of police forces in all aspects by 40%, is something I adamantly oppose. The question that rises in my thoughts is, does the call to defund...
Hey, sorry, can people hear anything?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
...come from a necessary need, or does it come from years of pain, suffering, and anger? If the call is found to come from the latter, I think that our fine debate is over, and we should take the time to discuss another topic. If it is found to come from the aforementioned, I think that here is where our opinions will be dissected and analyzed. So I ask, where did the call to defund come from? Who was the person that came up with the idea? And why have so many people latched onto the idea without understanding what we would actually lose if a 40% decrease was implemented? Yes, it is true that police forces arrest minorities at disproportionate rates in the U.S. and any other country in the world. But it is also true that as a superpower, our minorities live below the poverty line at a disproportionate rate, and that has absolutely nothing to do with the police as it does systemic racism. But that's another discussion. In local municipalities, our poverty-stricken neighborhoods actually benefit and feel a positive impact from police programs and community outreach. These are programs that support safe and strong communities. When police command staff are presented with a reduced budget, these programs will go first. They will not reduce expenses for personnel and equipment. So when you say defund the police, where do you actually think they're going to remove money from? Let me give you an idea. The Community Affairs Bureau, which is charged with dealing with all our complaints, will be eliminated. The CCRB, which is the Civilian Complaint Review Board, is an essential need. That will go too. Our Auxiliary Police Unit, gone. Crossing Guards, axed. PAL, our beloved Police Athletic League, no more. Slowly, a 40% decrease would destroy the community support I've just discussed, thus possibly making things worse. Last I checked, there was an increase in gun violence the last 2 weeks in New York City. Defunding doesn't sound too attractive amid that, does it? I certainly don't think so. The brave souls that are charged with protecting our communities, African American communities, should not lose the protections of our tax dollars because of a few racist, fearful, ignorant, and violent police officers. Our dollars should fund de-escalation training, sensitivity training, and a new program that I suggest that all police officers must serve as correctional officers for at least 2 years before they can ever patrol the streets of New York City. This model can help enormously in rooting out who our fearful racist cops are, and it can teach our officers on how to become masters of de-escalation without the use of guns or a knee on a neck. Can someone please tell me, how does removing $2 billion, $2.5 billion from a $6 billion budget keep an NYPD officer from killing me or even brutally arresting me? I don't think the money is the answer. I truly believe more training and the correctional officer program is. I understand the pain and anger that we as African Americans feel, but we should also understand that America was born out of racism. So the question is, should we defund America or should we attack racism itself? Once again, defunding and abolishing police forces by 40% isn't the answer. We should find another way to get the things that we want done. Thank you and good night, and I hope everybody enjoys my presentation.
Great. Well, thank you to Jack. Caitlin, if you could relay our thanks to him for providing that floor speech for the opposition. Very insightful. I don't see any names in the chat, so is anyone interested in doing a brief floor speech for the government? Any volunteers? Okay, moving on then to the closing speaker for the opposition, the leader of the opposition, Mike Holder. You have 3 minutes for a brief closing speech.
Yes, good evening. Yes, as my partner had mentioned, police respond to a number of high volume calls, and they don't, as it is, they don't have enough manpower to, respond to every little thing that happens. They have to respond to every call. And so by cutting the budget and firing or downsizing it, that doesn't make any sense. Crime is down, and the only link, we can give, thanks to our law enforcement, and we see the link through, the prison population is up. More arrests are being made. More criminals are being taken off the streets. People are feeling they're feeling safer. And we can't let, certain instances, to be, blown out of proportion, because when things get blown out of proportion, we lose sight of the underlying problem which is, crime exists. We need our law enforcement to be healthy mentally as well as physically in order to keep us safe. And what would that take? We are talking about making departments malnourished. We need a healthy law enforcement, to be in order to, protect our needs and our well-being. We need to, we agree, we need to reallocate the funds, but reallocate them within the department, in order to make them strong, to make them stronger. And as far as, like I mentioned before, better programming, how to make them better equipped to deal with certain situations, because they are on those streets risking their lives. They are in those communities. In Brooklyn, they arrested 36 gang reign. Gangs exist, they they arrested 36 gang members in Brooklyn. I'm sure that community feels much safer with them off the street. And like I said, we just need more training for our officers, and we need to show more support and address the underlying problem instead of pointing the finger. Whenever a bad situation happens, we can't turn our back on it. We need to come together and figure out a reasonable way to alleviate the underlying issue. And that's why, we opt to defund the police.
Okay, thank you for the closing speech, Leader of Opposition. I'll now turn to the closing speaker for government, the Prime Minister, Charles Hopkins. You have 4 minutes.
The question is not whether we should train the police, we should tame the police. The problem that we have in this society today is this. The reason why we having this discussion isn't because of the lack of training on the part of the police. Let's get this clear. The reason why we having this discussion today is because of the police's attitude that they're above the law. This is why we're having this discussion. My opponent said that the scary sight is the sight of not having the police. This is a scary sight. When a person put his knee on your neck and you tell him you can't breathe, and instead of him taking his knee off his neck, his partner grabs your leg. This is the training that they got. So what we gonna retrain them to do what? One take the knee off and one put the knee on? What we gonna train them to do? To be more respected in the community? The issue before us today, and at this point in time, is the issue of trust. The reason why we have this discussion today is because of lack of trust of the police. That's plain and simple. We call 911. We don't call 911 thinking that the police will come and we trust them. We call 911 out of necessity. We call 911, that's plain and simple. We don't call 911. We don't stop the police on the street and say, I just got robbed. We're scared to stop the police. Recently, in Baltimore City alone, the police gun task force had been found guilty of setting people up as they're trained. They was trained to go in the community and to stop gun violence. What they did, they was trained to go in the community and shake it down. This is the training that we see. The training that we see is this here, hands up, don't shoot. These are cliches and slogans that's coming out of this social upheaval that we see. But this ain't no cliche, this is reality. My hands is up, don't shoot. Don't shoot me, I can't breathe. These are the things that the police are doing. So the question is, do we trust the police as they exist today? No. Will training them make them become more trustworthy? No. The only thing that will change these police is a slash in their budget, a reallocation of funds into the community, a reallocation of those funds into social entities that we said earlier and spoke about, that will change the whole paradigm of the way they think. When the police realize that your money is being slashed because of your attitude and the training that you got to be brutal and hostile and have a military occupying mentality is being slashed. Therefore, being resolved, you have no more money. Therefore, you are no longer allowed to be an occupying military force. And we conclude with this. Trayvon Martin, George Floyd, who's next? That's the question that needs to be answered. And will it be a trained police that do it to them? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much to all of our debaters. We're going to move now. I'm going to ask Sagar to move the judges into a separate group. And then we will proceed with the RDP debater panel led by our very own Camilla Broderick. So could you let me know, Sagar, when that is done?
I will.
Julia, just to clarify, the judges now can discuss together what their thoughts are and then decide on the vote, or how does it work?
Sagar will be moving the judges into a separate room for discussion, a separate Zoom room.
Okay.
So once you should see an image on your screen moving you into that room shortly.
Okay, thank you.
So you should be able to join it now. Okay, perfect. Professor Evans, are you able to join the breakout room? Oh. Is she not able to join it? I will see if I can move her into it. Huh. Oh, okay, she just entered it. Everyone's in the breakout room.
Great, okay, so while the judges are deliberating, Sagar is also actually going to bring up a poll where all of the audience members can vote themselves, and that will be the tie-breaking vote if we need one, because there are 6 judges. And so while that's all happening, feel free to jump in at any moment with an update on that, Sagar. But while that's happening, I'm going to hand it over to Camilla Broderick for the RDP debater panel. And I just want to say quickly, Camilla is a seasoned debater with RDP and has also been helping out as a tutor for other debate students. And it's been great to work with her on this debate in particular. So I'll hand it over to her, and then she can also introduce our other RDP debaters to give a little background on their experience with the program.
Hi, I'm Camilla, and I was the inaugural fellow for the Rikers Debate Project. I started going to Rikers Debate Project when they started teaching classes in Rosie's in 2016, and when I was incarcerated there. Oh, wow, okay, the poll's up. There we go. Anyway, I was even on Full Frontal with Samantha B debating, and we beat the men, which I will always point out because they were too confident. Although I do think that Jack would absolutely kick my ass, and you all heard him, so I know that that you know how good he is too. This is hard when everyone else is muted, and I have no idea if anyone is actually laughing at my jokes either. All right, so I'm just gonna keep talking and pretend that you are. Anyways, yeah, I really enjoyed being part of this. It was the first paycheck that I ever got, and I was really, really, proud of it. It's still the only paycheck I've gotten. Not to hold you guys up for anything. Anyways, yeah. Now I think that I've been doing this for quite a while, and I've kind of gotten the hang of it, and I'm trying to help out all the new fellows and the new students that we have, and I've been on these Zoom debates, and yeah, so I'm gonna let Charles and Mike also introduce themselves too, and their experience with Rikers Debate, and if you guys have any questions for us, we'll be happy to answer them and try not to con you out of your money. Yeah.
Hey, thank you, Camilla. And I would be remiss if I didn't say I didn't recognize you. And you know why.
I have no fun there.
Hey, but as Camilla said, and I'm honored to be a part of this process. And I think it's very important that everyone understands just what RDP does, because every Tuesday and Thursday, we have this debate activity, and in that mechanism, it allows for people to come together and have a critical perspective about issues. And and what's uncommon to prisoners is that we're not accustomed, or ex-offenders, or while we're in Congress, we're not accustomed to being able to express opinions on a wide range of ideas. So what Rikers Debate does, they come in and they'll say, well, here's an idea. Here goes something to debate about whether or not prosecuting misconduct should be a crime, and then tell you that, oh, you don't have a right to say you with it. You have to be against it to make us think and to get us out of our comfort zone and to get us out of our emotion, to get us out of our prejudice, and to get us out of our biases. And this is I think for me, has been one of the better aspects of it, because it allowed me to become objective and to be able to say, well, I don't really have no issue, whatever side, I'll take any side, because they trained me to do that. They trained me to think objectively. And as Camilla said, Camilla always, when we was earlier, when I was on, she always fell on the side of the unpopular, but she always argued it as if she believed it. And we know that she didn't believe it, but she argued so passionately that it convinced me that, yeah, this is what this Rikers Debate is about. To be able to convey your views with a sense of passion and conviction, whether you believe it or not.
Well, Megan asked a question in the chat, so I'll read it out because it's for the RDP fellows.
Yeah.
Has debating ever changed your mind on an issue? And if so, what's an example?
I'm trying to get, I think it was universal basic income was the one where I I believed in it, and then when I started looking at the opposite side, I was like, maybe this makes a little bit more sense, and I started getting into that side a bit more, although I admit that is kind of the losing side to be on, but it did influence my own personal opinions about it.
I was when we first started, they had one of our debates was about COVID in prison, and at that juncture, COVID hadn't hit the prison population real hard, and the governor down here, he had said that they was talking about releasing people, and so I was like, well, COVID hadn't hit prisons real hard, so that's not really a big problem in prison. But later on, as COVID became more in the prison system and people started dying, it had me kind of fluctuating in my perspective at that time. Right? So it had the debate, what it did for me, it made me think both ways. It didn't make me just say, well, I'm just getting out of prison. Yeah, they should let everybody out for because they got COVID is in there. It made me stop and say, is it another side?
Great, thanks. I want to turn it over to Mike, give you an opportunity to answer that question or any other thoughts you have.
Yes. Yeah, as far as that question go, when I first participated in a debate and I would listen, like I'm gonna use Camilla for an example. I forgot what the topic was, but it just amazed me how, you know, she could sound convincing on one side, and then when we switched sides, you know, the following week, she could also make that sound convincing, you know, and it's like, oh man. But basically the discussions are, you know, things that I wouldn't normally be discussing, you know, in my everyday life. And since I've, you know, joined the debate team, I've started, you know, having those, you know, conversations, you know, and expanding, you know, not only my mind, but the minds, you know, of others in my proximity, you know, and I don't, you know, I've done, you know, a lot of time, and the only way, I was able to travel and, I continue to travel is in my mind, doing research and experiencing new things, vicariously on what I read or see. And these topics, are very important topics, that I enjoy, talking about. And I'm just, grateful for the whole experience, That's my.
Here.
So and our and someone from RDP suggested a question, which I'll pose to the RDP students and debaters, which is, who is one of your favorite RDP teachers? You've already given the example of Camilla, Mike, and Charles, but besides Camilla, who's one of your favorite RDP teachers, and what makes them a strong teacher?
I'm gonna say John, and what makes John a strong teacher is John has a good understanding of the fundamentals of debate. Although John's articulation, he has a problem getting to the point in time, but he has a good way of giving good examples of the concepts that he's given. So it allows me, when he's explaining things, to be able to conceptualize what he's saying and be able to understand from a practical application, because I'm real prone to, if I can understand it and I can practice it, then I'm applying it. So I would say John, outside of Blondie here.
No, I'm Blondie. I also like John. He's very high energy and engaging and very friendly. So, you also want to be like as involved as he is in like the moment because of like his personality and everything, which I think is like a really great thing. Like I wish that I could be like that, but not thanks social anxiety. So, but I also have always enjoyed Josh as a teacher, even though he doesn't really teach debate that much. But I like, when I get criticism or when I get praise from Josh, I know that it's real. Like when Josh says something that I did something good, I know that what Josh is saying is real. And so if he says I did something well, I know that he means it. And I know that if he's like saying that I need to work on something, I know that he's being honest with me and straightforward with me, which I really appreciate. So I will also always say Josh.
Yeah, I was this is my first, I think this is my first time working with Josh, and he's thorough, and I like the fact, that we was able to correspond, and he made sure, I was straight and good to go. So yeah, I'm gonna say Josh. That's it. That's all right.
Mike. Mike.
Does anyone else have questions for the group? You can just say them out loud or add them to the chat. So someone, Richard, added, how did you find out about the Rikers debate?
So some corrections officer just came bursting into my dorm unit and was like, hey, Riker's debate project is here. Does anyone want to come? If you want to come, you got to come right now. You got to like come right now. And I was like, okay. Nobody told me that. Nobody said anything about it. And they were like, yeah, well, you have no time to get ready. You either come now or I'm gone. And I was just like, all right, fine. And so I went. And it was, it was interesting. There's not much to do out on Rikers, and I enjoyed it. And so I kept going every week. And then I was waiting for the same officer, and I was like, where are you? You were supposed to be here at noon, and you're not here. We got to go. And so that's how I found out about it.
And the institution I was in, they signed up, they put sign-up sheets up. And when I signed up, I went down there, and they had a nice collective of people coming in. But when it does settle, it was David Lang and Rebecca Blair that was constantly coming in. And, yeah, I enjoyed it. I learned a lot. So much so, like I said, when I got out, I had contacted them. They took me out to dinner. We went up to Georgetown, scene. That's my first seen Camilla and another fellow, and Josh. Yeah.
Yeah, I was introduced by a friend of mine. We was a part of the Beyond the Bars Fellowship with Columbia University. He told me about it, and so I joined, and here I am ever since.
So, Julia, I've given the judges 15 minutes. Should we bring them back now? And
Has it been 15 minutes is what you're saying? It's over?
yes, it's been 15 minutes since they went to the breakout room.
Okay, yes. So I guess we will let them back in. I'm just going to read this last question aloud and have people have it in their minds for when we all separate into breakout groups for the social component of this. And you can see it in the chat. It says, similar to programs like RDP, what would be a useful program or service you'd like to see offered within correctional facilities? And so that could be a question for our RDP students, and also just to think about all together in these groups at the end. And also I do want to ask about the poll. Has everyone completed the poll? If not, please do. And Sagar will let us know the results after the judges present their reasoning.
So the judges have returned to the main room. So if all of them could turn on their videos and microphones, and hopefully they'll have come to a decision now. If not, if you think that you need a minute or two, I'm sure we could give it. But if you're ready to give your decision now, then that would be perfect.
Just a clarification, do we need to give a collective decision, or are we giving individual decisions?
This is individual decisions.
Okay.
We have like a survey thing that just appeared.
Yeah, I see. Okay.
Sorry, the poll is still up, but that is not, that is a separate.
Yeah, that was for the audience.
Oh,
oops.
I'm sorry, I just.
Oh, okay.
That's okay. That's okay.
I replied as well. Sorry, I thought that was for us.
Sorry, we should have clarified that before, but we can move on to the individual judges and their responses. So on the list, Shawnee Evans is the first judge.
Sorry, what do you want me to do exactly?
Sorry, just present your reasoning for your decision and what which side you would choose.
Okay. Wait, which part do I say first? The decision or the reasoning? I want to follow protocol.
Sorry, decision first and then reasoning.
Okay. So I am going to, I think that the government wins the debate. And that is because I thought that there were some arguments about the role of police in communities as being an occupying militarized force and creating mistrust and making people feel afraid. And I did not think that the opposition responded to those concerns that were raised by the government. I also thought that the opposition talked about funding, and I remember there being a phrase about it being a drop in the bucket to reduce police funding by 50%, and that money could be spent in education instead. And I thought that that argument undervalued the weight of this amount of money and what good it could do by perhaps being differently allocated. So those are my two reasons why I chose in the way that I did. But I thought that both teams made very strong arguments, and I will end there. Thank you.
Thank you. So now I'll call on the next judge, Farah Ghanem.
Okay, thank you. Yes, so first, thank you for including me in this process. You know, this is a topic that we've been hearing about, and it was timely, and I appreciate hearing the thoughts of the two sides, which I thought were really interesting. And by the way, I should say that my judgment is going to be different than my personal belief. I was listening to just what I thought actually was a stronger argument regardless of how I view the issue. So I just want to put that disclaimer because I'm going to support the opposition in their argument, because I actually found their deep argument about that we can't, and by the way, I think also the recorded speech, perhaps this way, so I'm not able to differentiate maybe between the recorded speech and what the debater said directly. But I thought, to me, the key issue was you can't really solve structural issues by defunding the police, even though, I mean, defunding could be done for multiple reasons. I thought thinking about the broader issue of racism, the broader issue of poverty, the broader structural factors that actually shape society was, to me, very compelling, and that was brought by the opposition in a clear way. And I didn't feel the government side responded to that very key point that spoke to the way I think about things. So I thought I came with a particular opinion, and I thought the opposition managed to make me think a little bit more about where I'm standing on this issue. So I thought they did a good job addressing the issue. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Moving on to Nina Johnson.
Yes, let me echo Farah's statement and say thank you for including me. Thank you for welcoming all of us into this space. It was really wonderful to listen to the thoughts and the arguments. I was really entranced while I was listening, so thank you for that. I will say that I believe the government won their argument, their case. They used a little bit of data, which is always important, to make their argument. $100 billion is the city's police budget for New York City. It's a lot of money. And so I really appreciated the government side for saying, we're talking about $100 billion, not a few million, not a little or small budget. I think they also made the argument very poignantly about questioning the notion that police keep communities safe. And I didn't hear a response from the opposition side to say, these are the ways in which police keep communities safe, when the government side questioned that very fundamental piece of this. And I believe the government side made the argument about putting more money toward the prevention of crime, right? And $50 billion is not a small amount to put toward the prevention of crime. I think both sides would have benefited from more data. I think both sides would have benefited from using examples of where the police have been defunded, like Pittsburgh was the first place to use EMTs and ambulances instead of calling the police. The whole country has moved toward that model, and it started in the 1960s, and it started in a Black community. That kind of history is important. understanding when the police got larger budgets, outsized budgets, and what it was meant to do in the 90s for the crime bill around the war on drugs and the ways in which drug use is racialized. Understanding that history helps us make, I think, better arguments about what defunding the police actually means, right? What it looks like, where it's been successful. Pittsburgh, I think, is a great example. So use that one if you guys need it. But I really want to thank you. I thought you all did a great job. I loved the passion. I think these are important subjects. And so I appreciate all that you put into making your arguments. And thank you again.
Wonderful. Thank you. And just a note to all the debaters, but particularly the RDP debaters who may be debating this subject again, please take note of the suggestions there as we continue in our series of George Floyd protest debates. It may come up again. So moving on to Krista Thomason.
Yes, thank you very much. That was, let me echo everybody else saying that this is a really fun experience, and I really appreciate both teams. I think you guys both did great jobs, and you both had the good points. Both teams, I think, had strengths. I'm gonna go with the opposition, and I decided on that because I ultimately am persuaded by the question of what defunding actually means and looks like, and whether or not we're talking about a reallocation, better use of that money, as opposed to sort of just cutting the money. So I was persuaded by their arguments that at the end of the day, what we're actually talking about is using the money that we have better and in better ways. And so I felt like I didn't quite hear from the government what a sort of full-throated response to that particular point. So I did appreciate that both sides acknowledged that that was actually something that it seemed like that's at stake in the debate. So I felt like it was good that you guys, and I felt like the opposition did a better job of acknowledging that that was really what was at stake, that those were the grounds of the debate. So, but like I said, I think both teams did a really good job, and I was really impressed.
Great, thank you. Passing it on now to Julie Baker.
So at the risk of editorializing a little bit, I think in thinking about the opposition side, I do think there's an interesting question here of whether when a system is flawed, do we respond to that system by hamstringing it? And I think about as what I think is actually a fair parallel is the public school system, in that the American public school system is also in many ways responsible for the perpetuation of systemic racism. And I've seen directly the effects of defunding that system, and I can attest that defunding those schools has not made them more effective at educating minority students. That being said, I ultimately am voting with the government side because in a similar vein to what Nina shared, I think the primary argument for having the police as an institution is that they keep communities safe. But the government effectively argued that the police do not, in fact, keep communities safe, that there's not a correlation there, and that in many ways they introduce disruption and volatility into communities through largely unchecked police brutality. And I didn't really hear that question answered by the opposition in this debate. So what I would have been looking for was some kind of argument to link the presence of police with the continuation of safety in communities, and I just didn't hear that made. And so I would vote with the government side as having done better debating on the issues.
Thank you. And for our last judge before the poll results are announced, Joel Lawson.
Thank you. This was interesting and completely new for me, so I enjoyed it. I thought everybody did a good job of presenting viewpoints, and I'm going to go with the government and defunding on the basis that during the debate, the government began with some data. There was a shortage of data throughout. I agree with Nina about that. It's helpful, I think, in a debate to have actual facts to go with your opinions. And beginning, as Charles Hopkins did, by saying only 5% of police time and effort is spent on serious violent crimes is a way to begin to think about things. As I said, when the judges were talking, the other side wants to try to achieve many of the same results as defunding, but didn't explain how to do that within a context of a police force, which is currently thought of as a person with a gun. And to change the police that much internally was never presented in a way that I could see a way to get there. Defund and start some other activities, you can begin to see how you do that. But with that said, I thought both sides presented quite well, and it was interesting to hear. The mention of Camden's police force helped to offset that a little bit, but we still never quite got clarity about how you change the image of a police force in such a way that people calling 911 realize that they can have someone come who isn't going to be there carrying a gun and afraid that the episode is going to lead to some kind of violence. So that's my opinion.
Wonderful, thank you. And now I'll turn it over for the poll results.
So I'm sharing the results now. So as you could see, the poll now is showing 61% for opposition and 39% for government. But prior to the few judges who voted, so when it was just the audience, it was 66%, 34. So the decision wasn't changed by the decision of the audience wasn't modified by the judges voting overall. So that is the results of the poll.
Thanks. So looks like a pretty strong vote for the opposition. Ultimately, it is a 4 votes then for government and 3 for the opposition, considering the audience vote as 1. And so we do turn it over to the government side as the winners of this debate. So thank you all for participating. We really appreciate your time, judges and debaters, the time you put into prepping and all of that today and previously. And so I just want to invite everyone to stay on for a couple more minutes to follow up on some of the conversations we had started during the debater panel, which happened while the judges were deliberating. And just have a few minutes to connect in breakout rooms. So if you could make those breakout rooms now, we can all stay on for a couple minutes and say a quick hello, maybe with a smaller group before signing off. But thanks to everyone.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. I'm going to split it up into breakout rooms, but feel free to leave as you need to, just to have a little smaller conversations. I'm sending everyone into the breakout rooms now.
Thank you, everyone.
Oh, here we go. All right. Hey, Angela.
Hey there. Hi, everyone.
Okay, I just stopped recording. That'll take a second.